Testing 1, 2.
Know the name of the fire there on the bottom? Huh? Welcome to the fourth part in the series, Basics of Mental Health for Abanim, Dayanim, and Paiskim. We'd like to thank Rabbi Deutsch, Shlita, for agreeing to participate in Mitzvah Shem to introduce the topic, and to Mitzvah Shem even he was asking to stay afterwards for questions and answers. So if anybody has questions throughout, either for the Rav or for Rabbi Dr. Zev Brown, who will be giving the clinical presentation, feel free to write the question down and send it up, or Mitzvah Shem will pass around the mic afterwards. Just to come also to have Deutsch's participation, his Rebbitzin, and a lot of the Bezdin issues that come up, and Rav Deutsch is a noted mumch in komikzois, but also I don't know how many people know about it, but in the mental health field, Rav Deutsch and his Rebbitzin are noted mumchim in the field. I'd like to introduce Rabbi Deutsch Shlita.
Camera's a long thing. Yeah, I'm not saying I'm not sure I'm saying secretary. Oh, there's no secretary. There's no secretary. Oh, okay. Yeah. Shus Marana Brabana Brabaisai. In Yerushalmi it says that Misha Imrim Olav She'edem Shtei Mesechtes Ve'ini Yedei La'achas. It's Tzarech Le'idiyai. I'm certainly very far from being a mumche in mental health in Yonim. In the Lashon of the Chovos HaLevavos, Ha'hechrech lo yeshubach v'lo yigune. It's an inevitable chelek of the Avodas HaKodesh of a Rav in these times to be able to try and be a resource for the tzibur in Yonim of Chelei HaNefesh and Refuas HaNefesh. If we accept the Hagdar of Reb Chaim Brisker that the matar of a Rav is to ton chesed mit zan olam, then one of the greatest chesadim that as Rabbanim we're confronted and challenged to do is to help Tzayin Kodoshim with inyonim of Agmas Nefesh, and V'yezes Chorenu, that this is part of what's become the Avodas HaKodesh of Rabbanim, Yeshvim, Almidin. There isn't an area really of Halacha and certainly Dayanus that isn't deeply impacted and overlaps and integrates the use of mental health professionals. And the particular angle that I've been asked to perhaps share with Chaverim is to explain the difference between Musar, Avodas Hashem, and Inyonim of Koiches HaNefesh, and when we are dealing with chayli hanefesh, which requires refuah. How do we distinguish between the two? And the kasha is the question demands an answer, because we're familiar with the lashon of the Rambam in Hilchos Deis, k'may sheyesh laguf chayli, kach yesh lanefesh chayli, u'k'may sheyesh laguf refuah, kach yesh lanefesh refuah. And the Rambam in Shmeini Prakim, in Akdama to Pirkei Avos, is marich to explain many inyonim in Keiches HaNefesh based on a model of chayli taken from chayli aguf. And if we're ma'ayin, the Rambam's clearly speaking about what we would call the avodah of tikkun amidos, and not what we would call clinical or pathological work. And yet the Rambam is describing that as k'may sheyesh laguf chayli, kach yesh lanefesh chayli, which means that a nefesh which is misaligned in terms of any of the key midas that we're familiar with from the Lashonos of the Rambam calls that chayli, which becomes addressed in a similar way than a chayli aguf becomes addressed. Like a chayli aguf has refuos, the nefesh has refuos. And so too the Rambam in Shmeini Prakim says that the concept of aspaklaria hami'ira of Moshe Rabbeinu and aspaklaria she'ena mi'ira of Shar HaNeviim, he says it's totally on shleimus hamidos. And kechala yoseh that the shleimus hamidos, the nefesh is able to be, the neshama is not able to be meir. And the fact that a person's neshama isn't able to fully express itself with shleimus comes machmas misochim in the Lashon Rambam. Misochim means blockages, occlusions, which the Rambam says was the nafkamina between Moshe Rabbeinu and Shar HaNeviim. So it seems to be that the impediments for the nefesh expressing itself b'shleimus, the Rambam seems to understand again are inyonim which we would associate with tikkun amidos, or in the lashon of the Chazon Ish in Hilchos Shabbos, ein ben maturuf u'blial v'lo klum. The difference between a maturuf, someone who's insane, and a blial, someone who's diabolically evil, is v'lo klum, can often be a chut hasayra. Baal Pachad Yitzchak in Igros Uksovim writes that one of the greatest tishtushim that have overcome the Ummah Sa'ilam in our doyer is the ability of what he's referring to, and it's called the insanity plea. The borders between a person being achroi for his ma'isim and what the Chazon Ish calls a maturaf. How do we distinguish between the two? And the question is very basic. For when a Rav, a Dain, and so on is confronted with a challenge in Inyonei HaNefesh, are we speaking about something which demands chizuk and what we call classic avodas Hashem or avodas Hamoseh, and are we demanding refuas hanefesh? Now, you may say lemay nafkamina will refer to a therapist who is a Yoresh Shamayim and a Ne'eman, and someone who has sound clinical judgment, and let them decide lemay nafkamina to us. Why is that decision our decision? And the answer can often be because if we want to try and help a parent or a Rabbi understand why a certain intervention may be clinically necessary, very often a parent will challenge us as a Rav and say, very, very often, and I'm sure many of you have heard this, Amol, they were mashgichim. Amol, we never heard of therapists. My parents always said tzvei frask, and such ideas like chadoshim mikorav bo. Where is this coming from, Bichlal? Why is this justified? We never knew about this. Well, some people say no. Even we understand that we need therapy, but we can see clearly from all the gewaldige goynes of Friedrich Gedolim. Rabbi Rucham was such a goyin in human nature. The Grace Rebbes had such gewaldige insight in human nature. So Zalman Shikin Sagodel, why are we speaking about therapy? Why are we speaking about medicine? Why are we going outside the Kaisler-based medicine, the Dal, the Amish Halacha, to be able to seek refuas hanefesh, ma'alonu v'lahem? So even if we don't have to make the judgment, which very often we're not even perhaps qualified to do, but we often have to be mechazik. This is a conversation that I'm zeichet have many times with Bnei Kehillah. When it's necessary for there to be an intervention on the clinical level, Why? Where is this coming from? Like, and so on. And it also goes the hepech. There's sometimes where parents, either out of desperation for a Yeshua, for a problem that's become crisis, or stem from the fact that sometimes people go to the kotzai hepech and are tremendously spoil from those who are in the professional field. And again, very often will then abrogate their responsibility and achrayus to be mechanech the children or to be melamed them, and the chelik that does require parenting and limud and responsible chinuch, and say, well, we have a professional involved and we'll leave it to them. So the question comes from both ends. So even in an instance where we ourselves are not being machriya, how do we guide parents and how do we ourselves understand when we're discussing something which is to do with refuas hanefesh, and when we're trying to understand something which is shaykh to the realm of avodah? What we'll try and just present to the Olam can really see Bahar Chava in the Chibur Nifla called Eitzes V'Hadrachas, which is written by Rabbi Dr. Greenwald from Monsey. Sefer is two halakim be'ikr. In the first chelik, this nice is discussed Bahar Chava. First, to explain the various chelkei hanefesh, how chelkei hanefesh expresses itself, how to distinguish between avodah of tikkun amidas and chelkei hanefesh, and all that we'll say is bichlal dvarav. That's a maramakim, someone who's isaac in it Bar Chava. But just perhaps to share perhaps some clarkite in the Hagdaras, and then obviously it's not possible to cover the full hekef of the Neisei, but just perhaps to establish certain klolim, siyata d'shmaya. Both in the bracha velikaya and shama, and find a similar nusach in the l'shem yichud that we say before hanachas tefillin. We speak about in the nusach of hanachas tefillin the neshama shebemoichi, or we speak about the neshama shenosato bi. That leads to mevucha gedola in the kadmoinim and understanding what the mahus of the Adam is. We always understand that if hisharu sanefesh, the chelik that's netzach, is the chelik haneshama sheba'adam. So we always understand that the essence of a person is nishmasai. Neshama shenosata bi. We understand though that the neshama comes chotzuv mitachas kisei hakavod, absolutely shalom. In the lashon that is brought in a number of Sifrei Avodah, it's not clearly the lashon of the Zohar HaKadosh, but it's called the Chelek Elikah. That's basically the Gufa Adam. So if the ikar of the Adam is nishmasai, the neshama is yerid shalom, and that's the ikar of what the Adam is. So where they're pegomim, and how is it that the Avodah of health just as the Ramchal is magdir it, the neshama can't communicate directly its ritzainais with the ivarim gashmiim of the Adam. The neshama, which is kol kule milamalo, can't be mitzaveh a yad to be maniach tefillin. There's no interface, there's no communication between the neshama and the yad of the Adam. So therefore, there's an aver called the moyach. The moyach has the greatest koyach to be able to understand inyonim ruchaniim, and therefore the moyach can understand the ritzonos of the neshama, and that provides the mahalach through which the neshama can be mitzaveh devarim. But the neshama is not yet the mahus of the Adam. The neshama is a chelek that comes milamalo, that's mo'ur the Adam lasis ritzain boirei. The ikar mokum where the avodas habechira is, this is Yisai that's mavur in Ramchal, in Gra, in Balatanya, kama v'kama kadmeinim that are isik in the sugya, The ikir chelik of the bechira, and therefore the ikir mahus ha'adam is in the chelik ruach of the adam, the ritzinus of the adam, the leiv ha'adam. That's why so many times in mikra, the meisim of the adam are miyuchas to leiv. The ikir of the adam is his rotzen in ruach. The adam can be mitzave the seichel, beruchai, to be able to be nichna to the rotzen of the neshama, and then the seichel will be able to be moire on the ivarim, what to be pale. Or the adam beruchai could be machlit, that he wants to be seisen, what the neshama is being moire him to. And then the adam can be mamshich ruchai after the ritzinus of gufay, and be nimshach to the hepech of what the neshama is trying to be mal him to. Say that dvarim is mavur nefesh chaim and shar aleph, that the ikr chelik of the neshama is bihiloi neri al roshi. It's lamala from the adam, and it's mitzabah to the adam the rotzen ha'elyon. The makam of bechira is in the ruach of the adam. That the adam is boicher to be following the tzivuyim of the neshama. We're moisif to the neshama oyer and kedusha, and that's what's nishar la'achar. The adam is meis, but bechayov, the ikr maus of the adam, the makam abechira, the ikr makam which is the ani of the adam, is in his ruach. So maybe we understand from that there are two places in which the neshama can be blocked from being mitzaveh and being madrich the adam to be oiser etzayin bayrei. One is if the moyach doesn't function. Neshama shebemoichi, it requires a healthy moyach to be able to communicate with the ivarim of the guf. The neshama could be mitzaveh the adam dvarim elyonim in his govim, but if there isn't a healthy moyach to transfer that to the ivarim, then what remains is cheli hanefesh. Mimele, in an instance, for example, that will often encounter a most tragic illustration of where the neshama is desperately trying to communicate with the moyach, and a moyach chele is transferring confused messages to the ibarim, is OCD. Where the rotzen of a ben Torah, of an Oved Hashem, is to be medactic ba'alach and to be Oved Hashem b'tmimus, but the moyach is communicating a garbled way in which that rotzen of the neshama should stel zechais in the ivarim. So the moyach is demanding impossible repetition until it can get assured that the person has fulfilled the chiyuv, b'chule b'chule. So memele, when we in the Yesod Hadvarim, the distinction between avoida and cheli hanefesh is that avoida refers to be mechazik a healthy moyach, to better and better listen to what the nefesh is asking for. To be more the ruach of the adam, to be roitze, to follow to have the rotzen to follow what the neshama is asking. But that can only be if the moyach is healthy to transfer those messages. And so one key area in which the field which when a clinician operates is being merapa the moyach. And the moyach is an aver like any other aver in the guf. The moyach is just a sophisticated muscle. But instead of it being a muscle that just responds to physical stimuli, it responds to emotional stimuli and responds to other stimuli. But it's an aver. It recently was published from a sefer called Machsheves Eliyahu, from the Ksovim of Rabbi, in which he brings that Rabbi once explained that to Bachrim, that if a Bacher's hatzlacha in learning is merely from Kishron, then that's not going to remain lo netzach la'achar mea v'esrim. Why? Because Kishron is a function of the power of the moyach, and the moyach is an aver. The same way as every aver of the adam is chayzel la'afar, the moyach is also going to be chayzel la'afar. The only chelik of his sharus hanefesh is what came from the rotzen of the adam, from his ruach, that then was meshabed his moyach to do something beyond what the moyach can do. That's already a kinyan that the adam was kind of. What comes naturally from the koyach of the moyach disintegrates like any aver. The moyach is an aver. An unhealthy aver doesn't allow the neshama to communicate with the guf. So the klal advarim is when we're coming to distinguish refuas hanefesh as opposed to avodah, the question is, are we being merape a moyach that's chayle, or are we being ma'ur the rotzen to want to be nimshach after the rotzen of the neshama? And that's the klal. A second instance in which there can be chayli and chayli as opposed to avodah. So far we've spoken about the moyach being able to be a healthy aver to transfer the ritzainus of the neshama to the Eivarim. The second is there could be chayli in the ruach too, in the ritzainus of the adam. And there we deal with a much more subtle thing, which are not problems of moyach, but problems of rotzain, what we call disordered personalities. People have a distorted sense of self, a distorted sense of what they desire, a distorted sense of emotion, of an emotional center. We're not anymore speaking about kilkulim in the moyach, we're speaking about kilkulim in ruach. And those also require refuas nefesh, and there we can already see that the distinction between what's chayli and what's avodah is much more subtle. Marshall, let's take the midah of gaiva, for example. How do we distinguish between what the Rambam calls a chayli nefesh, which is gaiva in the way that we know from avodah samoser, and a person who has a disordered sense of self, which leads to pathological gaiva? That's already much more dakistic. In the first category that we discussed, a moyach that's chayli is much easier to define and much easier to diagnose and much easier to isolate. That's clearly discernible functioning. In the case of a chayli in ruach, that becomes already much more difficult. The borderline between someone who has a disordered personality and someone who merely, as we would say, would be helped by a good shmuz can often be much more subtle. And here again, just to mention klolim, it's obviously not possible to be makif pratim, is essentially we use really three klolim. The first klal is that in chanami there may not be an exact clinical way to be magdir where the gvul is between a disordered ruach and something that can be helped with avodah. But the question of that we would go back to the klal of Chazal, oilam yehi daita shel adam ureves abrius. At some point, there comes a place where the person has simply taken a break from what derech eretz is. That's the first indicator that the person has gone that far, that he's simply become out of conventional or social or ordinary functioning norms. And that itself should be the first indicator. That's not just a question of degrees. Sometimes a person can have an idiosyncratic personality. We're speaking about what we call the first of the three column, which is intensity. How far has it taken the person? The second is how much we see the person is aware and in control when they want to be of what they're going through. Person can present us with a certain distress where we can see the person's engaged, fully aware of the extent of his issue, clearly understands what he needs to work on, and then can be helped to do that. Sometimes the person themselves won't even have enough self-awareness to know where they are. That's usually, again, an indication that we've crossed from avodah into chayli. And those are included in what we call, what is after the first, which is intensity, what we call frequency and duration, which means how often is this problem coming up for the person, and how long does it last when it happens, such that how frequently does the person lose this control, and how intense does it last when it happens. But the key point is that in general, something which belongs to the realm of avodah will come with a degree of self-awareness and a wish to change it, and a not basic knowledge of how to change it. We're presented with someone who either isn't aware enough or doesn't ever feels that he's lost control of the problem to the point that he no longer feels that there are times when he can feel, I can control this, which is beyond the ordinary aliyas and yuridas that there are in every person's avodah. Then again, we're probably describing a situation where the ruach has moved from the ordinary challenges of aliyah and yurida to being a ruach which needs refuah. As we started with, it's very often not us as Rabbanim who will be making that determination, but the clarity that we need to give those who are being mechazik while they go through the process is firstly, in inyonim that are meshach shayche to a moyach that needs refuah, is to destigmatize therapy and to explain that we're not tinkering with your neshama. And in this case, where if it's a chayli of the moyach, we're not even tinkering with your etzainus and your ruach. We're being merapeh the moyach like we'd be merapeh a broken leg. It's just the moyach speaks a different language. So a leg can be fixed with a cast, and a moyach is fixed with iyun and machshava. But the fact that we're talking to you the language of seichel doesn't mean we're tampering with your muskalos. We're not tampering with your understanding. We're not tampering with neshama. We're being merapeh the moyach, the method of which often is to speak in the language of the moyach, which is thinking. When it comes to the inyanim of ruach, it's more subtle, like we mentioned. But very often, what we can be mechazik those going through the process is to say to them that there's a concept sometimes of ein chavush matir atzmei beis asurim. Limud hamusa relies on the person's own iyun, which relies on them being able to recognize the chisaron, to correctly understand what the chisaron needs to be fixed, and then to be able to implement it miritzayin. And in the case of where a person's ruach is limited, one or all of those three may be missing. An incorrect, like we said, sense of reality, being overwhelmed by the issue beyond being able to solve it, or not being able to correctly identify the solution. And the key thing I think that is kedai, and I often find myself sharing, is that very often there's a misunderstanding about what therapy is. People assume that therapy means that the therapist has been endowed with some type of almost mystical kishron by which you can open up the head of the person, tighten some screws in their nefesh, close it up, and then nisrape. And I often say that's not the case. Therapy is a chavrusashaft in your nefesh. The more you're willing to handle with a therapist, the more the therapist gets clear the sugya with you. But ultimately, the only person who's going to wrap your nefesh is you. The therapist is there to give you kalim. Right now, you may not even know what's wrong with you, fully understand what's wrong with you, know how to solve it, or be able to solve it. Ultimately, we're giving you the kalim. And therefore, you can be reassured that we're not tampering with your neshama, we're not tampering even with your ruach. We're giving you kalim poshet so that the strength should eventually come from you yourself. And this is often the chizuk that we can give to those undergoing it. People are often very frightened. Is medicine going to change my personality? Is therapy going to change my personality? Am I exposing myself to things which I'm not going to feel comfortable with? And the answer is, using that perhaps very simplistic hagdara, that it's a chavrusashaft in your nefesh, means like a chavrusashaft. The sugyas will be only what you bring to the table. And it's hein latav and hein lamutav, and we'll conclude with this point. I find myself sharing, especially in Bachrim population that Rabbi Shlita is going to address, often very what we call famacht, very closed. And we often encourage Bachrim to say the therapist can't guess what's bothering you. The therapist isn't endowed with a way to take an x-ray of your nefesh and figure out what's inside you. It's only as much as you can share, it's only as much as you're willing to work, it's only as much as you're willing to engage. And even though that obviously is a tviyah for the person to be willing to open up and to often access and bring out very, very painful places in the nefesh, but me'idach gis, it's a chizuk to them that it's their sugya, they're in control, it's where they want to go, and it's ultimately to help them. And this point is worth emphasizing, that, and it will often come up in the Bnei Akihila, that same klal, someone who isn't yet ready for therapy can't be sent to the therapist with a hope that the therapist is somehow going to be able to find that way to engage them. We all know the kaishi of a chavrusa that doesn't shtar zachzu. So the essential chizuk that I've often found helpful is to share this. That therapy is really a way for the person to develop their own ruach. It's either and that, or an oifen of being merapeh the moyach. And as soon as a person feels that therapy has gone into the area of hashkafa, then it's no longer therapy. And Baruch Hashem, we're now zeicha to have an ever increasing pool of resources of therapists, Yireim Ushleim and B'nai Terim Uvhakim, who themselves are extremely careful to know the distinction between what their tchum is and where it now belongs back in the tchum avoda. And Be'ez Hashem, we're about to hear from one of the mitziyonim of this group.
Yeah, Shukaya, quite the Rav. Just wanted to mention to thank also the Agudas Yisrael, the convention of Synagogue of Bonim, for joining us with this project. And the series is Leila Nishmas of David Shlomo Bir Meir Zal. I want to give a grace Yashar Koyach to Rabbi Dr. Zev Brown, noted psychologist and helping from Yidden and Sarah for many, many years. Son of one of the Gedolei Rabbanim, Moshe Brown Shlita from Far Rockaway. We thank you very much for making the trip and for addressing the Shkoyach.
I think Rabbi Deutsch gave the perfect definition of a personality disorder. And this is a question that we get all the time. When is Limud HaMusar the appropriate response to somebody who's a little self-centered, a little bit, not such a nice person? And when is it a disorder that requires real therapy? And the word is dysfunction, which is, I'm just touching what the Rav said, which I think was where a person has gone beyond the regular human rough edges, shall we say, of his nature. And he's gone into the realm of dysfunction. He's destroyed his marriage. He's destroyed his relationship with his children. He's destroyed his relationship with his employer. He's no longer functional. He has devolved into the area of dysfunction. And a characteristic of every personality disorder is a total lack of awareness of the fact that they're struggling. That's actually the difference between OCD and OCPD. OCD is an anxiety disorder at its core. So the person themselves is miserable. They are mully anxiety. They are constantly checking, trying to establish some level of Yeshua Das in their lives. The person with OCPD is totally fine. Everyone else around them is miserable. And that's the definition of a personality disorder. Someone who has borderline personality disorder, they're fine. Everyone else around them is crazy. Everyone else around them is miserable. And those are the facts of a personality disorder, where the person themselves has a total lack of self-awareness about their own dysfunction, and everyone else around them is absolutely miserable. I think the Rav's definition is not that he needs my haskam chas v'sholom, but is mamish spot on for what exactly is a personality disorder. It's a tremendous opportunity for me to be here. It did take me about 3.5 hours to get here. It's also very intimidating. I'm not used to presenting to such an accomplished olam where people who really know what they're talking about, especially to follow the Rav, is like, I feel like an ant in the sandbox. I'm not really sure what I'm doing here. I'm really just sharing my own observations, my own experiences over the last 15 years or so. The tzibur, I'm going to go a little bit off-road. I'm going to spend a little bit less time on specifics of mental health disorders and a little bit more on preventative. That there are things that I think that a Rav of a Kehillah, there's a tremendous amount that he could do to prevent the struggles of mental health, the struggles of personality, the struggles that many mishpachas seem to have. And if we can be a little proactive and a little bit maybe ahead of the curve, perhaps there are certain things we could do, and then Mi'at Hashem will have time. We'll get into some specifics of OCD, education, yeshivas, things like that. The job of a Rav is exceedingly complex. I don't envy anybody here in this room. There's a job of a paisik. That's one job, requires its own chavaz das. The job of a Rav is a Rav has obligations to the tzibur. He has obligations to the yochid. He has tevis klal, tevis prat. It's not uncommon that these obligations are in direct conflict with each other on a regular basis. He has to create accountability for the tzibur, as well as being inspiring for everybody in his community, keeping the peace, giving people space, maintaining everybody's dignity at all times in the tzibur. He's expected to be an expert in every area of halacha, hashkafa. It's He has to teach Torah on the highest level to the skilled London, to the person who could barely read Aleph Beis, mamish in the same shir, not just in the same shul, but in the same drasha on Yom Tov. Not an easy job at all. So I wanted to begin primarily by clarifying, in a sense, what I'm here to do today, what's my job. I'm not here and adolescents, which is the topic of today, in order to allow the entire mishpacha to maximize its olam haruchni, its olam hagashmi, and ultimately to fulfill their tafkid as Yidden, as Bnei Aliyah. You ask your average balabas what the job of the Rav is, and he's going to say, he speaks on Shabbos. And if I have a shaila and, Hilchos Basa B'chalav, a spoon fell in the wrong, he's supposed to be on call for me at any time. If he's really dedicated, he gives a few shiurim during the week, he visits the sick. These are all the tasks that the tzibur thinks that that's the job of a Rav. I don't have to tell anyone in this room, but that is probably the smallest, most insignificant part of what a Rabbanus is. Being a Rav is a multifaceted undertaking. It involves being a jack of all trades, many miktsayos. The Rav is a clearinghouse for everything, in a sense, that involves the entire life cycle of a Yid. He has to know how to answer shilas about birth. He has to know how to answer shilas throughout the entire lifespan of a Yid. End of life shilas, he has to be familiar with. It's likely impossible for a single Yilud Isha to have that amount, at least for the average person, to have that amount of knowledge in his head at one single time. And perhaps the most important skill a Rav could have is he should know when he doesn't know. I remember when I first moved to Far Rockaway, I was a Meishav in the Beis Medrash, and a very experienced Rabbi came over to me and says, I want to give you one piece of advice. He says, if a bacha asks you a shayla and a taisus and you don't know, don't start to fumfer. He says, the first thing to do is tell him, I don't know. I don't know if I was makabel it or not, but it's certainly in my head that to know when to seek outside help, knowing when something is, in a sense, beyond scope of practice. Everybody knows that there are certain shilas that are beyond what a Rav in a shul is supposed to be answering. Even if he knows the answer, he's not supposed to answer those shilas. He's supposed to go to an Adam Gadol. And there's no reason to think that shilas in mental health, some are klach hayad, and everybody knows, OCD shilas, things like that, basic personality shilas. And then there are some shilas that are just chomer ad ma'od, that a person has to have they used to call it the Rolodex. I don't think we have a Rolodex anymore, but he has to know when to call, who to be in touch with. And to me, that in a sense is perhaps the most important skill, not just the Rav, but anyone in any area who is achroi for the tzibur in any way, to know when something is beyond his area of expertise, that when he can reach out, when he should reach out. So before we get to some of the specifics of the issues, I wanted to take just a little bit of time to discuss the incredible, powerful psychological impact and protective influence that a family's Rav can have on the entire mishpacha, in a sense, and to describe what I think is perhaps a primary component of Rabbanus, the protective role that a Rav can have on the tzibur, and in turn, the protective role that a tzibur can have on the yochid, I think should not be underestimated, particularly when it comes to areas of mental health. based on my observations of people, of the human condition, it seems that what people crave the most, and I really think that we all really crave this. We yearn, in a sense, and something that we need in order to be happy, in order to have Yeshiva Das, in order to have a sense of contentment in our own lives, is a sense of mission, a sense of fulfillment. We need to know that our lives matter, that we're doing something that is purposeful, that our lives are meaningful, that we matter as people, that we matter as human beings, that our lives have significance in a sense. I think without that, if we think about it even for 2 seconds, we realize we'll be filled with a sense of yush. What's it all about? What am I doing? Where do I'm just like some piece of wood bobbing along in the stream? We need to feel that we're doing something meaningful with our lives. People live their whole lives distracted, and some successfully. They go the entire gamut of their lives, and they're not really connected to something meaningful. They're not really pursuing a dream, a mission, a purpose that's meaningful. But I think when we live our lives with a sense of meaning, with a sense of purpose, with a sense of mission, it's a game changer in how we go through the whole halach of our lives. There's an entire branch of therapy called logotherapy that was developed by an Austrian psychiatrist by the name of Viktor Frankl. If anybody's interested, he wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning, which is essentially that if we live life without meaning, life is just, it's painful. It's really painful. And being able to give our lives meaning, being able to give our lives purpose, is an incredibly powerful concept in a sense of contentment, in a sense of happiness, in Avodas Hashem. And that's really what happiness is. Happiness, it's not roller coasters, it's not fun. I'm told by experts that there's no such word in Yiddish for fun. I don't speak Yiddish well enough to know. If anybody can correct me on that. There's no word for fun, because fun is not happiness. It's roller coasters. It's a sense of maybe of joy that's probably not happiness. What happiness is a sense of contentment. It's a sense of mission. It's a sense of Yeshiva Das, knowing that our lives are meaningful, that our lives are purposeful, that we matter. And when a person has that sense of Yeshiva Das, will be open to growth, will be open to Avodas Hashem. We always need to grow from a position of strength. When we're feeling good, when we're feeling positive, when we're feeling energized, when we feel like we matter, we're going to want to matter more. We're going to want to accomplish more. We're going to want to strive for more. We're going to try to make our lives even more meaningful. If we're feeling a sense of yish, if we're feeling unproductive, we all know that if somebody's down, he tends to make very poor decisions. None of us make good decisions when we're in a depressed state, when we're not feeling positive, when we're not feeling energized. If we're unhappy, we should know we should never make decisions. Never make decisions in a state of unhappiness. People grow tremendously through agonizing suffering as long as they believe that there is purpose for that suffering. Meaningless suffering is agony. Purposeful suffering is just painful, and it's not really suffering. We think about it, that's really what Yisurim Shalava is. It's a Yisurim that we don't necessarily deserve, but it's designed to create a connection to the Rabbi Shalom that sort of is a high octane fuel for Olam Ha'emes. And that's really what it is. It's purposeful suffering. It's inherently purposeful suffering instead of purposeless suffering. Rav Wolbe writes, and the only real way to learn Musar is from a position of strength, that a person first has to recognize where he's doing well. He has to first see his milus before he could look at his chesroinus, because if he first looks at his chesroinus, all that happens is he gets depressed. First, we have to operate from a position of strength, and only then can we grow from it. And I believe that a Rav plays an incredibly pivotal role in helping people see their own value as human beings, that the people in his kehillah are people that matter. Something which it's absolutely critical to a person's emotional health, to his personal growth, really to everything that encompasses the life of a Yid, is that feeling of value, the feeling of mattering, the feeling of living a life of purpose. If a Rav can successfully create and orchestrate an energy of growth, an energy of mission in his kehillah, So not only does it result in tremendous steiging, but it has tremendous protective mental health benefits for everybody in his tzibur. When members of a kehillah feel that they matter, when members of a kehillah feel that they're working towards a goal, they ultimately will have more yeshiva das. They will be healthier. They will be happier. They, their families, the impact on future dairies cannot be underestimated. They will have fewer mental health issues. They will just have a inner contentment of yeshiva das that has tremendous psychological benefits. It's easy to do. I shouldn't really say it that way. It's hard to do, but it's easy to do. It's a communication. It's a smile. It's giving people a sense of value, that I value them as a person. It's really just about the relationship. We can communicate it with words. We communicate it with body language. If we make people feel valued, they will feel like they have value. They will feel a sense of contentment. When we exist in a way that's bigger than ourselves, when we're part of something, a mission that's bigger than our own lives, so our lives become that much larger and that much more meaningful. People, of course, have a tremendous resistance. Nobody wants to be told what to do. Even encouraging people to live a life of meaning or live a life of value can backfire. People just want to be left alone. I have my starim, I do my chesed, I give my tzedakah, I eat my sushi. Just give me. I'm a from Yid. Leave me alone to my gashmias. That's really what people want. All is well in my world. Let's not rock the boat. It's very appealing. Yet the stagnation of living a life that way does not result in happiness. It's crucial to recognize that in order to have a simchas hachayim, we need our lives to matter. We need our lives to be purposeful. We need to be growth-oriented. And being growth-oriented is tremendously protective from a psychological perspective. I think a kehillah needs a mission statement. Doesn't really sound so, secular moistus have a mission statement. We stand for this, we stand for that. We can package it however we want. Every company, every moistus, every institution needs a reason to exist. It has to have a reason why we've chosen to create it. When it comes to Ruchnis, it's hard to have a single mission statement. The mission statement is shleimus of every yid, every second of every day. It becomes much more complex. A regular meisid can have a titrated, very directed, very small mission statement and still justify its existence. It's hard to say that a meisid achinuch or a meisid of a kehillah or a shul should have a mission statement. Exactly how a Rav should go about creating a mission statement. We all know if we're makabel big things by Nilo and Yom Kippur, so we're left with nothing. And if we're makabel little tiny things, then we have it and make it even smaller. So then, sometimes we're left with chatucha really schabit. The only way to generate growth, it really is by limiting it, and either by making it time limited or small bites. But creating a kehillah that has a growth mission, that has a sense of positivity, a sense that we're not just a shul where people daven, but we actually stand for something. It creates an entirely new sense of self-identity, where people who take our Yiddishkeit seriously, we're growing people, we are people who matter. The energy that can be generated by such a mindset that a Rav can directly create in a shul should not be underestimated. Creating a mission statement is often, it's often not well received, especially in certain types of a tzibur. People are worn out. People really just want to be left alone. But if we can, I think, in a sense, develop the sense that this is something that's very, very important for a tzibur. To be part of something that's larger than ourselves, it really has tremendous protective benefits. It'll broaden our emotional reservoir of being able to withstand so many different mental health issues. What a person should do, how his particular kehillah should do it, I think we'll stay out of it, but the concept, I believe, is universal. when we're part of something, when we feel like we're living life with a certain type of energy, it really has tremendous benefits. It has tremendous protective benefits. It has tremendous protective benefits psychologically, emotionally. People will be happier. Their spouses will be happier. Their children will be happier. And really, Doris of Klal Yisrael will reap the benefits if we can successfully create a tzibur that can do this on a practical level. So how do we go about creating this energy in a shul? It's really almost impossible. Just from a personal perspective, I think the best way to do that is we have to leverage ourselves. Everybody carries a unique set of personality, cognitive skills, interpersonal skills. The most important thing that a Rav can leverage is himself. And if he can find an area where he himself is passionate about, so that's something that he can use to create an energy about in a particular shul. It could be learning, it could be a focus on davening, it could be Isik B'Tzarchet Tzibur, it could be klal work, it could be achrayis to somebody else. Even within learning, there are so many different areas that a person can focus on. There could be Gemara, it could be Be'in, it could be Bekis, it could be a learning program, it could be Pnimiyas Atayra. There could be so many different types of areas that if a Rav is passionate about a certain type of growth, a certain type of Avodas Hashem, it has tremendous protective benefits. I've seen it in different shuls. There's certain shuls where there's just an energy for Limud HaTorah, pure, raw, unadulterated Limud HaTorah, and it has transformed Balabatim, who maybe were, okay in yeshiva. Between their 30s and their 50s, they became Talmidei Chachamim. They became orangutan in learning. They became people who were energized in Limud HaTorah, and it has transformed their entire families. There are shuls where the focus is on achrayis for the klal. That doesn't mean that they don't learn. Of course they learn. But it means that there's a certain energy of activism. There's a certain energy of achrayis for yenim. And that growth mindset is so tremendously important because the families feel that they're a part of something. They're a part of, it generates an energy in steiging, in Avodas Hashem, and people get involved in Yiddishkeit in a way that's not apathetic, that's not just flat, but it's growth oriented, and it has a tremendously powerful effect on a tzibur. And when we pick if a Rav picks a topic in his shul that he's passionate about, that he cares about, he has a close connection to, that energy is often contagious. And he can use it and leverage it in order to create growth in its tzibur. How much time do we have, by the way? 10 minutes, 20, half hour? Okay. When people are involved in some, I just want to get to specifics of mental health as well. I don't want anyone to leave disappointed. I must admit that this is a little bit off road. It was not really my topic, but it's something that I feel discussing areas of mental health is very exciting. But it's much more exciting to never have to deal with it. And if we can create a tzibur of healthy, growth-oriented people, there are so many mental health disorders that we would never encounter. We would just never encounter them, and people in general would be healthier. We'll have a tzibur that's less focused on Gashmias. We'll have a tzibur that's more focused on Avodas Hashem. Living a life of meaning is tremendously powerful. It really is. It's tremendously powerful. The only way that this is accomplished is when the tzibur has a relationship with its Rav. If a Rav is just some random guy who sits in the front and he bounces from shul to shul, and his kids don't really have a Rav who's their father's Rav or who's their mishpacha's Rav, and it's not a person who they have a genuine close relationship with, so it's just a place. It's just a place where they daven, and maybe the last kabasa b'chalav shaila too. but they'll never ask a hadracha shaila to. They'll never have somebody who's a meriderach for the family, somebody to guide a mishpacha, which gives people that sense of mission, that sense of belonging, that sense of value, the sense of growth, and ultimately the sense of security. Because if a mishpacha knows, and children know, and adolescents know, that their family is anchored by a rav, that their family is anchored by somebody who, their family is not just some, a family that's operating on its own. If it's anchored to a kehillah that has a sense of mission, if it's anchored to a rav, that is makabel achrayus for the mishpacha, and has a personal relationship with every member of the mishpacha, from the children all the way through the parents, it's a game changer as far as psychological health. And yet, despite the fact that these things offer tremendous protective benefits, living a life of mission that's bigger than ourselves, full of meaningful relationships, it's inevitable that a rav will encounter mishpachas that struggle with emotional issues, with psychological issues, with psychiatric issues. There is no limit to the types of challenges that that the world struggles with, and there's no reason to think that the Frumme Welt is any different than, as the Rav described. This is not. Sometimes it's a chayle hanefesh, and sometimes it's a real chayle, and there's no reason to think that Frumme Yidden don't have the same chayles that the rest of the world has, from issues of personality disorder to mental health disorders, anxiety, OCD, depression, where people are in absolute agony from their emotional issues, shalom bayis, family issues, struggles with parnasa, the agony of substance abuse, the agony of addiction, and these are really, really painful struggles. Our community is not immune, and our teenagers, our adolescents are not immune to sexual abuse, to physical abuse, to neglect. We're also not spared the modern day struggles of gender identity, homosexuality, both by men and women, by the way, not uncommon in both. Parenting is very, very challenging today, seemingly much more than in the past. Either parents have less parenting skills than they used to have, or the kids need more than parents. I don't know which one it is. There's not a rav who doesn't have to deal with bereavement. In the normal derech ha'olam, where an older person loses a parent, and unfortunately where a child loses a parent, or where a parent loses a child, all of these are par for the course in the halacha of every rav, of every shul. There's no one who's spared having to deal with all of these issues, educational issues, where a child may be struggling in school, in yeshiva, and the family comes to the Rav and they want to know what should we do? Should we switch him? Should we not switch him? How's the Rav supposed to know what he's supposed to do? And yet the Rav, especially if a Rav has a personal relationship with the mishpacha, he is the address, as he should be, for all of these types of shilas, whether a child should be medicated for a particular disorder. Who does a mishpacha turn to? They turn to their Rav, because he's the one who guides the mishpacha as it should be. If parents have a child with a serious medical condition, how should they handle it? Should they keep it a secret? Should they not keep it a secret? What courses of treatment should they engage in? Sometimes it's halacha based, what's mutter, what's aser, and sometimes it's just guidance and advice. And the family turns to the Rav, because he is the one who's the meriderach for the family, and the Rav is the clearinghouse, in a sense, for a mishpacha, for every type of issue. So the issues that a Rav needs to be familiar with is exhaustive. Trauma, mental health, psychiatric health, personality disorders. The Rav is the address for everything. I really want to just focus on 2 or 3 and try to make it kurtz and sharp. And the first is OCD, anxiety. I'm pretty sure it was a discussion last week with Dr. Schwartz. It's an old classmate of mine from many, many years ago. I just want to focus on one specific piece of it. OCD at its core is an anxiety disorder. It's fundamentally different than OCPD, which is a personality disorder. Where it often comes to a Rav's attention is when you have a bacher who's starting to steig. He's 15, 16 years old, and he's really, the jets are starting to go, and he's learning late, and he's asking 1,000 different shilas. And how do we know? Is this healthy growth? Is this steiging? And we want to get out of the way and not stop the next Reb Chaim or Bishmol Birnbaum or when is this unhealthy growth? When is this really the beginnings of OCD? And we better work as fast as we can to put the brakes on it before it becomes a firmly entrenched part of his cognitive profile. We're not here to diagnose, and we're not going to make it as it's impossible to do it mamash in klach hayad. The simple answer boils down to OCD is an anxiety disorder, and if we remember that, we'll have an easy time, at least with the shalom aleichem to it. Is this a bacher who's stressed? Is he tense? Is he not going on a cholamay trip with the family and he's tense about it? Or if his parents say go, he'll go, but he would rather stay in Beis Medrash. It's a fundamentally different presentation. I'll give a mashal. Let's say we kanaka Shemon Esrei and we finish Shemon Esrei and we realize we didn't say Yalav Yavai. So our response is frustration. I have to say Shemon Esrei again. It's not tension. We're not anxious about it. We're not nervous about it. If a bacher has OCD, he's tense. He's anxious. He's mamash a ball of tension. So if a bacher is steiging and he's in the Beis Medrash till late and he's tense, and if he needs to do a mitzvah sheyef shalayidei acherim, and he can't do it because daf learning, that's a tremendous warning sign. It's not good. If he's happy to go do a mitzvah, but he's growing in his avodas Hashem, if he's asking shilos, and then once he gets the answer, he's happy, and even before he got the answer, he was happy, then it's not OCD. That's healthy growth. That's healthy steiging. If we pay attention to the flavor, we can often sort it out. If it's tension, it's a tremendous warning sign. If it's just positive Yiddishkeit, where he wants more and more Yiddishkeit, that's a very good sign. Healthy growth is sustainable. Unhealthy growth, it inevitably ends in disaster. We can't always stop the train. Sometimes it's a train that is on the tracks and it will go over the cliff at some point. Sometimes we can't stop it, but at least we should know that paskening his shilas is not helpful. There's a fundamental difference between being tense and being intense. You can be intense, a ganze Leben. A person could learn intensely with a focus, with a drive, not a problem. If he's tense, if it's nerving, if he's unhappy, that's what tension is. It always ends in disaster. Positivity is a predictor. Positivity and joy in Yiddishkeit means it's not OCD. It can look like OCD ein bismargin. Sometimes, by the way, it's just poor decision making, where a person puts all his kaiches into the first Shemon Esrei and Rosh Hashanah, and his mamish has no kaiches for the second Musaf Shemon Esrei. That doesn't mean it's OCD. He could have spent 3 hours davening a Shachris Musaf. He just made a poor decision. He put too much kaiches into it. That doesn't mean OCD. Poor decision making is not OCD. So just no one wants to stop the next goal. Nobody wants to get in the way of healthy growth and healthy steiging. The code word is going to be tension, not intention or tension, intense, but tension. That the second topic I really wanted to single out, maybe we'll do another couple, we'll see, is the topic of yeshiva. Certain communities, I'm not sure where we are all over the country. Yeshiva Mesifta it's a very hot topic. And I've seen many disasters in the following scenario, which seems to be not that uncommon. You have a bacher who's through 8th grade, is mamish at top of his year. He's mamish the mitzuyin of his year, and he goes to a top Mesifta as he should, and he falls mamish top to bottom. Mamish comes apart. And what happened was, when we're advising the bacher where to go to yeshiva, we fail to take into account that not every level in yeshiva requires the same type of kishur. Through 8th grade, it's primarily rote. It's primarily information processing. It's absorbing information. Once we get to Mesifta, especially in the top Mesiftas, it shifts to primarily Lumdus. And you have Bachrim who are very good at certain types of things and not as good at others. And if a Bacher goes top to bottom in his Mesifta, he's in big trouble. because he went from being mamish king of the hill to being the bottom of the scrap heap, and it's not a good place to be. It's very difficult to recover from such a thing. So the Rav is often I don't know if he's the Paisik Achron, but he's certainly a Paisik in the decision-making ability. And sometimes a Bachar is saying, I don't want to go there. He's like, there's almost like, and I've heard this from many, many Bacham, there's almost like a sixth sense where they know where their Kishrin is, and they know going to that kind of a Tap Masifta is going to be disastrous for them. But every Rebbe is telling them, you're top of this year, you should go. We have to be careful to recognize that top is not necessarily top in everything. And yes, most people, their Kishrin is evenly distributed and they're good at many, many different types of things. There are Bacham who are very good at certain types of things, and certain Bacham are not so good at certain types of things. Paiskim are not necessarily the biggest Lamdana, the biggest Lamdana, not necessarily the biggest Paiskim. Not everybody has the same. And when we make assumptions about a person's cognitive profile, especially when it comes to learning, it is fraught with risk. It really is. You could also have a Bacher who struggles with ADHD. So he's a very bright kid. And as he goes through elementary school, he's mamish top because he can pay attention to every fourth word and he mamish gets it. And maybe he could do that for 9th grade, 10th grade, depending on how smart he is. At a certain point, everybody needs to work hard. And if we just make assumptions based on previous experience, how he's going to go in the future, I just think we have to go to it with a certain level of Kavidreish is probably not really the right word, but to pay attention that not all boys are created equal. I want to close with just a Rav is often asked, as far as a psak, what a person should share when it comes to shidduchim. Pet peeve of mine, because I deal with the shidduchim on the back end, and the Bezdin deals with them also on the back end when things were not revealed. I'm not a Rav, I'm not a Rebbe, I don't tell anybody what to do. I just want to share a Maisa. It's a current Maisa, that there was somebody who had an eating disorder, a girl had an eating disorder, and Baruch Hashem, she did well. And they asked the Rav, and he said, should not share it. Of course, the stress of marriage brought it on, and now she's in a lockdown psychiatric unit, will be there for many months. If the marriage lasts, I think it'll be a nes nigla, not even a nes nister. They've destroyed her life and his life. And it's just agony upon agony upon agony for something that really didn't have to happen, because what happened was the Rav didn't understand what eating disorders are and how they operate. And it's a Rav's achrayus. If he's going to give a psak on an issue of mental health, he should know what the statistics show. He should know what the trajectory of it is. He can't just say, you had OCD when you were 16 and now you're 20. It's ancient history. We have to know, is OCD the type of thing that comes back, right? Whenever we're issuing a psak about a mental health disorder, we cannot make assumptions about how they operate, because each one has its own apidar hateva, what the trajectory is going to be. And we have an achrayus both for the person we are paskening for, and we have an achrayus for the person who it's negeya to issue a psak that's well grounded both in halacha and in mitzias. A Rav is an incredibly influential position for a mishpacha, for a young person's life. His job is overwhelming. He's an anchor for individuals. He's an anchor for the family. He has the ability to generate tremendous growth for all of his kehillah, and by this Hashem, he can be ma'achar kehillah, which to me is the most important job of a Rav, to be ma'achar kehillah. He can guide their ruchnius. He can be a crucial source of comfort in challenging times and the entire life cycle. He's a role model. He's a source of inspiration. And above all, a Rav is a person with his own struggles and his own humanity. May the Rebbe shall give us all kayach and insight to fulfill our tafkid and to each use our own unique role to be marbish shleibim in Klal Yisrael.
Thank you. I just want to point out something that's more challenging when dealing with the women. In other words, when you deal with the men or the husbands, it's easier to a little bit of a freer range. When you deal with the women, you have to also keep safe boundaries with how you communicate with them. Is there something you can add on that subject?
So the clear distinction needs to be made between where the Isha herself is undergoing therapeutic work, and where we're meeting the Isha as a mother. In the second case where we're speaking to the Isha as a mother of a child, usually it's really to be mechazik the father and the mother together, and one should generally avoid instances when one meets the mother herself or even speaks at great length with the mother herself. You can always offer to speak to both of them, even if your ikar mechuvan is for the wife to hear. One shouldn't be drawn into conversations where the wife has to speak to the Rav at length. If the Isha herself is undergoing her own therapeutic work, it's much more sensitive. And here the boundary is very, very important. It can be mechazik every now and again for a short amount of time. And the Rav has to be very sensitive that when the Isha starts discussing more personal things and starts sharing in a way that goes beyond just general chizuk, it's a point at which the conversation has to be ended. Usually, if the Rav feels drawn into long conversations, it may anyway be coming from a place of unhealth, and the same way as by an ish. At that point, the conversation should be limited. But in general, it is appropriate that the correct chizuk that the Rav could give is just overall general chizuk and direction. It shouldn't ever need to really be a long and drawn out conversation. Specific shaylas need specific answers, and general words of chizukim are calculated and pointed and brief and powerful. And beyond that, it's already something which is maybe an issue of boundaries.
I would just say from a therapeutic perspective, it's generally unwise to see across gender. I do have a policy that I meet every spouse, because I learned long ago that if a husband or a wife is seeing a therapist, there is a certain alliance that's created, and the other spouse is on the outs. And it's often very, very healthy where the spouse feels alienated and isolated from the therapeutic process. So I tell every younger man that I see, I'm going to meet your wife at least one time, and you can sit with me, you can be here. It's not about her, it's about you, because nobody lives in a vacuum, nobody lives in isolation. And at this point, I just tell people it's my policy. And therefore and she'll have access. She can call me on the phone if there are things that need to be, obviously there are exceptions to it, but as far as seeing and developing a relationship, chas v'shalom.
From Zoom, should Rabbanim give advice on which Masiftas a boy should go without speaking to the yeshiva first? I had parents who have come back to the yeshiva saying the Rav recommended a certain yeshiva when it's clear that Rav who have heard the yeshiva's take on the level of the Baruch, might have given a different opinion.
I'm assuming from the language of the question that we're talking about a case where there's a disagreement between a parent and a yeshiva if this yeshiva is the right choice for this bacher. The yeshiva is maintaining it's not the correct placement, and the parents are insisting that the boy has to be in that mesivta, whether it means to to either be kept in the Masifta if the yeshiva is recommending that you should move on, or in a case where getting in the first place. And that's the basis of the question. In general, I would only say as a general, and this is not specific to mental health, but as a general advice in Rabbanos, if I'm in a position to share advice, and I know the Mo'imed I'll do it is that a Rav is liable to be terribly, terribly misquoted, terribly misunderstood, and terribly misquoted, either deliberately or out of a desperate need for the person calling to feel that the Rav holds of what they hold. And a Rav has to know that every word that he says, it will be quoted as said or completely out of context b'shmai. Just to give an example, not to do it necessarily with mental health. Let's say in the case was asked before, an Isha calls up and describes a very, very difficult shalom bayis situation. The Rav says very innocent words, that sounds terrible. It's guaranteed she will go home to her husband and the husband will say, the Rav says, you're treating me terribly. That's what the Rav said. It's terrible. There's a chachma in being able to say, instead of saying that's terrible, you say, that sounds very difficult for you. It sounds like that's making you very distressed. It sounds like you're very upset. It's bets in the Mishnah Fureshes, Chachamim Hizharu b'divreichem, Shem Yovoyu, and Yitu, Yishtu Mayim Aroim, and they'll be Moitzi Divreim, as is Mefurish in the Mishnah. And it happens to say that to be misquoted, and and therefore a Rav by extension has to be very, very well aware that the first question to ask as soon as someone comes with an issue is there anyone else who has an opinion about this question? It's the first question to ask. It could be the most innocent sounding shayla. Does anyone else have an opinion about the question? And it's wise to do anyway, because there are many people, to save the Rav Agmas Nefesh, who justifiably or unjustifiably think that they have an opinion about the shayla, and the Rav will hear about it if the Rav gives an answer to them without cheshboning who else feels that he's a baldover in this inning. Very often you can speak with Marshall, you speak to even to a parent, and the Rav might not realize there's a shver, there's a grandfather who feels that he's a gvaldige baldeo. By warning who else has an opinion, its next question is, do you think they want to be part of this discussion? Do they want to share the daya? So before the Rav even starting to say anything legufa shel inyan, first to know who feels they're a baldover over here. Who am I going to hear from? Not half an hour after I hang up the phone, someone's going to call out with tightness. If the Rav would have heard this tzad, the Rav would understand. And sometimes they even right. And sometimes they might even be right. There may be a shver, a grandparent, or someone else who taka has a wealth of helpful information that would be critical for the person to know. And even if the Rav feels, I'll speak to you first, you could say, I'm going to speak to you first, but I would like to be in touch with any other people who aren't involved. And so that's just the derech klal. But the derech prat, in the case of the yeshiva, when a parent calls up, it's critical that the Rav says, I want to hear from the yeshiva also before I tell you the right thing. The klal, and this is not to be machbid, but every shayla, there's never a shayla, be'etzem, alan yuzdaiti, that can ever be answered without extensive research on the shayla. Besides, obviously, a shayla which is mamish ladina, and even then kulei hai. I remember once hearing from a Moshe Sternbuch Shlita, he said, he wouldn't answer shaylas on Tyra for Noshim on the phone. Because there's so much amol to know about that room and that room. If he would demand that it should be like this again amol, we come to the Rav and Shtub, and there's a Beisay Rav. You shouldn't even answer those shaylas by phone, even though now it's ongenum. But the Yisod Advarim is that whenever there's a shayla, it's choiva not to dispense short answers, to realize there's usually many other people involved and days involved. And again, it's a great oil, but even seemingly the most simple shaylas need tremendous research. And the Rav, like we started with, is always old to be quoted as a support to whatever day it is, and we really have to be aware of that. And it's sumo on the Rav to hear, like any inyanim of where there's two tzadim, not to hear one side without clearly hearing the other. Well, I would just add that I'm sure there's many times where the therapists become very frustrated, where a therapist will come into, where a client will come into therapy and say, I asked this to my Rav, this is what he said, this is what he said, and the therapist hasn't heard from the Rav. And it's a big limit, it's a limitation and a problem.
I tell people all the time, I won't believe what he says about you if you don't believe what he says about me.
Rabbi Dr. Brown mentioned about the Bocher who we can't tell if he's going too far, too fast because of healthy growth or otherwise. So what about a Bocher who it's been brought up by people in shul that maybe he's going too far, but the Rebbe and the Manal don't think they see anything about it. They think it's fine. On the other hand, it seems that he's manifesting things that are not regular, and it's not clear if it's intensity or tension, but it can't be discerned because he's already a little bit Asperger's-y to begin with. So you can't trust what anybody's thinking or seeing. Do you insist that he gets professional diagnosis?
Sometimes it's kedai to get somebody who's a mumcha to put their eyes on him and just to have a certain yeshiva das. You can monitor it for a tkufa, but OCD can spiral rapidly, especially if it's mixed with spectrum disorder. It can be complicated. So I don't know who's in a better position because the Rebbe and the Manal have a lot of experience with Bachram, presumably. People in the shul have a different perspective, so they may be seeing something that the yeshiva is not necessarily seeing. I'm not sure what the downside is to have somebody, have a conversation with him and try to be mishayir. And if it's good, so matav manam, I do that all the time. And sometimes they'll say, it's unclear. Let's watch and see. And sometimes we better do something more aggressively. So I will say though that yeshivas and people who operate outside the mizgeres often have an entirely different perspective because in yeshiva, certain behaviors are typical and common. And if a bracha is steiging during Seder and he's learning and he has extra asmada, there may not be attention because he's doing what he's supposed to. And people in shul may see attention that doesn't exist in yeshiva. So such a case wouldn't be clear, particularly if it's mixed with a spectrum, flavor to it.
Just from a Rabban's perspective, I think generally it's a klal in Rabbanos that always very, very careful with what other people in the shul want to come and talk about someone else in the shul. That's in the Rav should never really be open to hear what Chavri Beis HaMedrash say about each other. And the reason is because if you're willing to listen to Reuven talking about Shimon, and Reuven realizes you're listening to him, then how confident does he feel knowing that Levi is going to come speak about Reuven and the Rav's going to listen to him too? So the Rav generally always takes a very cautious approach to what someone is sharing. I'll hear you out, so it's with a clear siag that we generally, I'm only listening because you feel you're something l'te'eles. Keep your remarks l'te'eles. I only hear what you can describe objectively. Benegir to intense bachrim, I would just point out one thing that in my limited experience, balabatim in shul, and I don't mean dafka balabatim, I mean mispalim, get very nervous from anyone who davens over intense. Yena's too big, and this is gedolim about gedolim chaverim each other. He davens too loud, too slow, too intense, too this. Segate zayon, segirjit, and generally, in Beis Medrash, each one wants them to daven exactly like them. So befrat, you're right, befrat. So therefore, a bacha befrat, where it's mixed in, the natural sense of, that I'm really supposed to really educate Yanim's son because he's clearly doesn't know what he's doing, and therefore it's my task to do it. It's taken with a very substantial grain of salt, and just to add as a general nakuda, and again this is just very very bichlalius. There's a tremendous skill which I'm sure all my chaverim are very familiar with, of a way to listen to a person, allow them to feel that they've heard, and say no, it's important what you're sharing. certainly appreciate what you're just saying very, very much, and then doing very little about it. It's a tremendous, tremendous skill that all my chaverim, I'm sure, have become very good at. It's important that, and it's genuine. It's not checker. The person needs to be heard, but what they're saying may not be tzumzach. And there's a way of a person understanding that, no, the Rov's machshav, what I have to say, he'll listen to what I say. But from there to the Maisa, there's lav dafka. And therefore, even if another person comes and complains that the boy's in you're right, I'll mention it to his father, I'll speak about his manal, I'll keep an eye on it. And lav dafka. That's part of what has to be done. And what comes from others, if generally my experience was that today Baruch Hashem Menalim and Rabbeim are extremely aware of this issue with Bachrim, and generally they see the Bachar day in day out. They're generally gewaldig about Bari Samcha, and unless what's being brought to the Rov is a social issue, where a Balabos brings the boy, you see he's not getting on. Boys are becoming mesuchsach with him. There's issues that are happening, which is a social issue, and that they may not see in yeshiva. That's very important information. There's a bacher who's crossed the line from being intense to being inconsistent socially and not muruv. That's a very important piece of information.
One last question. We spoke about the Rav dealing with the woman. How about sending a woman to a male therapist?
I think Reb Zev mentioned before that that his policy is not to do that. Lahavdil, I think my understanding, although I'm obviously not qualified to speak about this, but my understanding is that generally, I think in general therapeutic practice, even amongst Einam Yehudim, is that mostly the hefsed is Rav al Aschar in most instances. So it's even on a clinical level, on a therapeutic level, simply in terms of technique, it's generally, I think the ACO has written about this, it's generally very much discouraged. So besides the Gidria Kedusha, generally therapeutically, it's not usually indicated. Maybe very, very rare instances in which it may be necessary for, let's say, a man who feels particularly threatened, from another man, and that, if we feel it will be better for him for a limited engagement. It's with tremendous shikol hadas and with tremendous yira that such a shayla has to be approached. And it's not just an Indian of schar middle and nazira. Unfortunately, there are too many instances in which even if actual michshol doesn't happen, but the therapy fulfills a deeper emotional need, they became very enmeshed, and it starts limiting the therapeutic work. It becomes very, very difficult for the client to be discharged, and generally the work begins to become distorted. And so really it's really only in a mi'uta of cases with tremendous gedarim in place, and usually for a specific issue and for limited time. But in the case of a therapeutic relationship that's needed for ongoing support, kimat v'lo.
As we conclude the series, I know Grossman didn't have a chance to thank himself yet, but he took among the many projects that he does on a daily basis, he took a very, very personal interest in this project and made it come to fruition. And we plan, Mr. Hashem, Rabbi Grossman's pushing very much to have future series on more specific and more extensive topics on mental health, for Rabbanim to familiarize them with the issues that come up on a daily, more than a daily basis. So I go to Shkoch, Nachmal Shkoch, Deutsch, and Rabbi Dr. Zev Brown for joining us tonight. And again, this could not have been done without Rabbi Dr. Jonathan Schwartz, Dr. North, and Chanich Krohn, and Rabbi Yom from Relief, who really helped formulate and guide this series of shurim.